We're ready.
Sorry to the audience who's been waiting for us to come online that we're a couple minutes late in starting, but here we are. And welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education Committee of the whole meeting for January 15th, 2019. Julie, could you please take the roll?
Sure. Mark Berry.
Present.
Philip Hood.
Present.
Julie Gottschall, present. Leanne Charlo. Present. Richard Haig.
Present.
John Morozen.
Present.
Susan Ryder. Present.
So we have a quorum, and we're going to begin. If you guys will all please join me in the standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we have the opportunity for public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please file up to the podium. Not seeing anyone. We'll move on.
No one is here.
To item 4, the addition of a discussion item. This is the opportunity for board members to add a future agenda item or raise an issue for some preliminary discussion today. Anybody has anything? I do, if nobody else does. I'm going to revisit an issue that we've talked a little bit about before one more time, see if it goes anywhere, is the idea of, I have a little bit of a note. It's the idea of articulation between the high school, our district, and District 67. We continue to get feedback from our community about a whole host of things, such as, why is it so hard to get our kids over to the high school for math? Or why does District 67 have a high school teacher teaching math over there? Or why is it so hard to find out how Lake Bluff kids are doing in the high school? Or why are we doing standard-based reporting when they don't do anything like that at the high school? There's all these kinds of ground level issues that if we were to articulate curriculum with the high school leading the charge, that many of these issues I think would go away. And for people who don't know, articulation is the process of aligning and planning curriculum from K or pre-K all the way through graduation so that everybody feeding into the high school, our district and District 67 and 65, are all on the same page and all have the same goal of producing the best possible high school graduates we can. And so you start where you want them to be and you back into what it takes to get there from every single grade. Typically that's led by the high school. And so I would like us to have a future conversation about potentially trying to formalize this without forcing it on anybody, because you have to have willing partners at the high school and at District 67. I do recognize that inroads have been made to articulation. There's more articulation going on now than was when I first started talking about this, but it is not formalized. I raised the idea of possibly an intergovernmental agreement between the three bodies. I don't think it has to be that, but it might be nice to memorialize the process of articulation for future generations so that this gets done when this board changes hand or when all the administrators retire and move on to other things. So I think that's probably all I want to say. I'm hoping we can talk about more of this at another meeting, put it on the agenda. If anybody else has any concerns or issues, please feel free to speak your mind.
I think it's a good idea. Are you envisioning then a report from the administration as to how that can be done, or the outreach efforts that have made where we are, where we think we should go? Is that what you?
I think for sure a review of where we were and where we are and what's been done, and maybe if there's a way to come up with a recommendation on how to make this process more formalized, more ritualized. I think that the idea, I floated the issue of a intergovernmental agreement. I think that scares certain people the way it's out there. Like I know District 67, their board president responded, was a little concerned perhaps about I gave them a heads up yesterday, the two board presidents, about I was going to talk about this briefly. And maybe my email to him wasn't as clear as it should have been, but he got a little concerned that we'd be trying to shove something down their throat, and they don't have any incentive to do that. And so we need to look at it from a partnership point of view, that it's good for everybody involved and we all have the same end goal. And so I would love to know where we were, where we are now, and where we would like to be. What is the progress? What's the roadblocks? What have the roadblocks been? And have a pretty upfront conversation about it, because I think we owe it to the community to talk about this.
I think it's only worth it if there's interest. Even if it's very preliminary, at both of the Lake Forest districts. If there isn't at all, then it'll be a complete waste of time, because they're the at the end of the day, they're the heavy hitter. We're pretty small potatoes in the scheme, and trying to put something together between 3 districts. And if they don't see the benefit to them, it's going to be a waste of our time.
Well, I'm thinking about something maybe even more fundamental, starting at a place where, maybe it's having somebody from the high school come in and present to us as well. I feel like there's always been a bit of a disconnect between our district and the Lake Forest districts, because there is closer alignment within the Lake Forest schools, shared superintendent, obviously. So, to sort of put our hand up and say, hey, you've got to take more note of us and include us too, and we want to be part of these conversations, seems to me to be appropriate. So I don't, certain things certainly they need to come to the table willingly on, but other things I think they would come to the table if invited, and we need to make it clear that that's what we're looking for. So I think that's a good place to start.
Well, if it was driven from the top, whoever, the principal at the high school, I would think that would make some sense, because it would kind of fall downhill to the middle school over there. But I would think that's where you'd want to start out, maybe on an informal basis, a discussion with her.
We have, I think a good report on where we were and where we are now, because we have articulation in many different areas now, what that looks like, what we get, and then it's very easy to look ahead, because we look at our strategic plan and say, what do we need to do to be successful with our strategic plan with Lake Forest? I know Shayla at the high school would always be happy to come. Anytime I call her for anything, we've got departments now meeting together. I think it's also a bigger picture, though, because 67 and the high school have a lot of articulation, because they have the shared administrators that we don't have.
They know exactly how their District 67 students are doing in the high school. Mm-hmm. We don't.
Right.
That's kind of annoying.
I think we need to remedy that. I think that's a great idea.
So
I think for sure that data ought to be shared about
We have
how our
the
kids
data.
are doing. Oh, you do have the data?
We have some data because of
some.
that intergovernmental agreement with the high school. So Kevin can present a little bit on what we get from that. But I also think that you need to know the articulation we do have, and then the articulation that might be helpful.
That we don't. Well, and I wouldn't think of it as us shoving anything down someone's throat. What I see
it was
is
the
that school
intergovernmental
districts,
agreement word that scared them like that.
what I see is that all 3 of our districts are probably spending a considerable amount of time and money developing curricula, making plans for things, and so it could only help to share that.
Yeah.
And some of the consultation we've paid for may benefit them as well. It'd just be nice to
In
have that
partnership,
working
we're
together.
stronger than we are as individuals.
Yep.
No doubt. So let's plan on a future conversation on the agenda where you summarize where we've been, where we are, and where we'd like to be. And then the board, based on that conversation and outcomes of that conversation, can authorize you to allocate time to that, right? Because to whatever the future endeavors of that are, because you only take your marching orders from us, so from the whole board.
We've made great progress in this area. And I think that there'll be a lot of good information for the board to know where we are in this area too when we do this, so.
I just love the idea of having something memorialized in some way, that it's just part of what we do all the time going forward, but we'll see if we can get it there. Okay. Nobody else had agenda items or discussion items? So we're going to start with the conversation. I think Mr. Khan is at the podium quite a bit tonight, talking about student fees to start with.
You can do it from right there, because then you can see them all too.
Okay. What you have before you is a preliminary recommendation on student fees. We made some changes last year by making one fee for all the students and combining the material and technology fee and tying it to the cost of the materials, with the board paying about 40% and the students picking up 60% of the materials. I redid the calculations, and the expenses are about the same. I think the fee is in line with what we've been doing, and we don't recommend changing it. The last time we presented, we were talking about extracurricular fees, and we were benchmarking our comparables, but we didn't have any real data on how much we paid and what the participation level is. So I wanted to provide that to you this year. The athletic number is not necessarily individual students, but that's just the total number. So that could be the same student in 3 different sports. I've looked at some of our other districts, and they are comparing their numbers based on just the stipend cost. This cost that I have here is kind of all in salaries, benefits, transportation, things like that. I think it's good information to have, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend changing the fee because, again, we are pretty comparable to our other districts. The only thing that I've noticed that we do that others don't is there are clubs. I think in order to increase participation, we don't charge fees for clubs. Some of the other districts do. That might be something to consider in the future, or elementary intramurals.
Is it fair to include salaries and benefits when those are going to be there regardless of whether they participate in athletics or not?
Well, this is not, we don't have to fill a stipend. So this is, if we have a team, then we're going to pay an extra salary for that. Or
Otherwise, we don't pay it.
Or if we add a team, for example, if we add cross-country, then we have to pay an additional stipend, whereas if we didn't have cross-country, we wouldn't be paying that. So it's truly marginal cost.
Okay.
But it's not like a teacher who's here anyway that we're going to. Good question. The biggest change we're recommending is a change to the preschool fee. We benchmarked our other districts, and we were fairly low relative to others in the preschool fee, particularly to our main competition, if you want to call it that. The Lake Bluff Park District has a 5-day program for preschool, and Lake Forest also has a preschool program. Both of those were about $4,000, and that was really the basis for the recommendation. The preschool program we identify children who have a need to be in preschool, and those children don't pay the tuition. They only pay the regular fee. This would be for students who elect to go to preschool versus some other childcare. There are benefits to the student because they can get in the building and get in a school setting where they'll be going to school in the future. But it's a very, very costly program to run, and we were really a relative bargain. And I think we were having to increase our number of students because we were so attractively priced. And so we're recommending increasing that. And we'd like to have some students as kind of regular peers to round out the classes, but we want to be competitive with other options in preschool.
Jay, can you refresh our memories in the fact that the kids that are in that, Kevin, it may be your question, we have costs for them anyway, even if they're not in our preschool, correct? Because they're getting speech and some services that we provide before they start school anyway?
Correct. So the students with disabilities have costs associated with coming to our program. So we are hiring a speech language pathologist, usually a social worker, usually,
They get services though before they come into school, right?
Through Lake County Early Intervention. That's not through our district.
Okay. I think that answers your question, Leon.
So for kids who don't require the services, they're coming to our program because we're relatively inexpensive, and it's a very costly program, and we're having to add sections and add staff and add buses and things like that. So we want to be more in line with other programs in the area.
So again, though, and I'm going to reemphasize, this is a program we don't have to offer.
Correct.
But we offer it because it's best for the children involved, because it gets them in the school. We provide services earlier. and it makes them successful, and then it allows the teachers that have them throughout the years to provide less and less services because they learn earlier, correct?
We have to offer it in the least, we have to offer a program for students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment. So we have to offer a program with typical we have to offer something with typical peers.
Okay.
So this is our way of bringing in typical peers.
Okay.
We do have to offer a preschool program, and the way to bring in typical peers is to charge them.
There you go.
So we charge the regular fee of $205 to the students with disabilities, and then for everybody else, we would be proposing that we charge the $4,100.
All right, that,
Thanks.
you answered my question.
Yeah, that answers it, because I was concerned about people having a question of why we're offering that particular program.
Okay. And then the last thing is the transportation fee. We did a lot of research last year. What we found is that in trying to keep the fee, by charging a fee to everybody, we wanted to keep the fee reasonable so that people of all means could afford it and to not create any hardship. And the fee that was set turned out not to be high enough to dissuade people from signing up for bus, even if they were low users. So we were able to cut one route, but we weren't able to cut as many routes as I had hoped. So we are recommending increasing the fee by a small amount to make progress towards our goal. But at the same time, I don't want to make any drastic changes by reducing service in areas or significantly increasing the fee, because last year we did a lot of groundwork to prepare the community for it, and we haven't done the same kind of work this year. So we're talking about a $25 increase in the student fee, and then I think a $50 in the family
What?
fee.
Why don't we just implement the recommendation, 300 per student, 500 per family? That would be if they missed the deadline. Why don't we just go with that? I mean, if you go back to your numbers here, before we started kind of giving the service away for a period of years, we were charging $215. I mean, inflation, to me, 300 seems like a reasonable number. We didn't have the impact because we set it too low. So I don't know that there's a whole lot more groundwork that needs to be done. I mean, I think the only thing that needs to be explained is we had to bring the feedback. We brought it at a rate hoping that it would allow us to eliminate routes. We had a lot of people, just because the fee was low, pay it, although they weren't users. It didn't get us where we wanted to be. So I think we need to. My opinion is you go in with a higher rate from the get-go.
I thought the reason we set a lower rate is because we hadn't had a fee for some period of time, and we liked the fact that people were taking the bus and there were fewer drivers, and we wanted to serve that purpose, not cutting the routes. I thought we wanted to encourage usership, not discourage usership. I'm hearing something different now.
We want to encourage it. We wanted to discourage the people who didn't take the bus very often from signing up for the bus, because we would need to reserve a seat for them on the bus.
Oh, I see.
So
But
that
you're
you
right
have-
on the second half of that.
Second half, we certainly don't want to discourage people from taking the bus, because
Right.
we have traffic issues then. So
Did we see
sort of
any
people on the
increase?
margin.
Did we see any increase in traffic issues last year with the implementation?
No.
We did not. And so we did bring in some revenue, which helped offset our costs, and we were able to cut one route. I think we cut two. We had to add one back during the year, but so we're still in a better position than we were last year.
And how much was it last year?
It was 125.
It was 125?
Yeah.
So the question is this the time to raise it to where we were before? Which would probably impact how many people would take the bus, because we do have families that the transportation fee is hard for them to do. Jay meets with them, and we put them on a payment program. That brings us closer to covering some of our costs, because it's constantly increasing because of transportation costs in general.
Jay, I didn't ask you this up front, and I don't think you said it. Do you know off the top of your head what we spend on transportation last year? Our total costs?
Regular transportation, it's
Wasn't it like 400?
Yeah, total is like 680 and, or 650-ish, and 100 of that is special ed, so.
So we've, like last year, you said
$500,000.
we recouped $50,000 roughly in, with these fees.
Right.
So if we double it, we're only going to get up to $100,000 if you don't have any drop off in ridership. So you're still barely scratching at the costs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the 50,000 is nice. It's not going to make a huge dent. We saw a very significant increase. The increase alone was 200,000 when we stopped being able to share routes. So we went from about 300,000 to about 500,000.
Yeah, just overnight.
And so this is 10% of that.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to like go through everything that we did last year, but we're still significantly lower in our charges, even with your proposed increase, than our neighboring districts. And I think most people that paid the fee at registration, they probably even forgot what that amount was. I think, you know, you're gonna put the fee in and they'll be like, oh, okay, and they'll pay it. So I'm of the opinion, others may disagree, I think you need to be a little bit more aggressive with your rate. That's just my opinion.
Any other feelings on that?
So it was free 2 years ago, correct?
Correct,
And now we went to 125,
correct.
and you're suggesting we go to 300?
It would still be reasonable compared to what other districts are paying.
And what do other districts pay?
Other districts typically have a model where people who live within a certain radius of the school pay the true cost of the bus, which is $400 or $500. And then people who live outside that radius, mile and a half, usually don't pay anything. Lake Forest is different in that they charge everybody, and it's about $800, so they're quite expensive.
Do you think jumping the fee to 300 would significantly cut back in users?
I do.
I would worry that we would have some traffic issues and some angry people. I could see going back to, in the area where we used to be, around 200, 215.
Yeah, I could go then, in that case, half of that, between 150 and 300, somewhere 215, 220.
The number that comes to me is 200. I remember having this discussion before, that we were going to gradually tick this up and kind of measure the sensitivity of people
Right.
to how much a higher sticker price would reduce ridership. And it sounds like we're in a very narrow path. We want to
Yeah.
reduce the people who sign up, who don't actually use the bus, but keep steady, people who do ride the bus. In any event, it's a narrow window. So I think in order to make sure that we hit that window, rather than overshoot it, maybe we go a little bit more quickly than $25 more, and go maybe up to 200.
Yeah, I agree.
And then see what kind of impact we have.
Because you're not going to see an impact with $25 increase.
Right.
It's not enough to make a difference financially or on the ridership, I think, so.
And hopefully 200 won't be either, although maybe.
But you need to inch closer, you need to find that line, yeah.
We definitely have to head to the higher
350
direction.
for a family.
So,
200
yeah.
per student. and
200 per student, and what would you have for family then, Jay?
50.
350.
350?
Some discount for the
Let's,
second student.
the three of us will talk about it. Right now, I think when we bring you the fees, we'll bring it probably at the 200 point. We do need, you're all correct, because we need to go in the right direction, and it needs to be higher. I think if we did it gradually, it might impact ridership a little bit less. So we'll just have to see, but we can bring it back with that.
We gotta find where that line is,
Yeah.
and that elasticity lines.
Are there any creative solutions to this, like a punch pass kind of solution? So you can sign up for the whole year, you know, you're taking the bus. Other people, maybe they just pay the $125, so because I know some days they're gonna do it. Is there anything, way to sort of target your usership through something like that?
The morning only rider or the afternoon only rider.
I suppose you have bus stops
We
and
could just
issues
create
like
a
that,
giant
but-
pot and have people call Uber.
Yeah,
Might be
right,
cheaper.
no, I'm telling
Except
you,
for, I think you have to be 14 and above to ride an Uber. I did some research on that.
Lake Bluff Special Mommy Uber or something, but,
You
yeah.
know, I do think that when we have to give the transportation companies so much direction. You have to guarantee, and so, and I get back to, there are so few transportation, even if we were to go out to bid, we'd probably wind up paying more. we're really stuck between a rock and a hard shell.
And they struggle finding
Might
people to
start
drive.
Phil's
right?
bus service.
But, you know, down the road, Jay and I have talked about it, we thought it would be way too drastic a move right now. When this is re-examined in the next 5 years, I think that going to the model that Jay's talking about, where kids, beyond a mile and a half, ride free?
For Lake Bluff, it might be a mile because we're so small, but something where, you know, if you live a certain distance away with safety hazards, et cetera, it's free. And if you live, if you live within a smaller distance and you're able to walk, then it would be a more significant cost.
And we're actually gonna put that in our notes because there's kind of a 5-year review cycle for all of the different operations. So right now, we felt like that was too high to do, too big a change. So we'll move with 200 and 350 when we do that. Any other feedback on the fees? I think we answered everybody's questions. We do need to approve them at the next meeting because we're already registering for school for next year. So,
Did you hit everything you needed to hit? All right, so now we move on to Jay, Con, and building use fees.
Okay. Facility use fees we usually talk about them as a cursory topic. We don't really generate a lot of revenue this way. We do like to allow our community to use the buildings, and so it's really designed in a way to accomplish that. We have a couple of groups, A, B, and C, which basically is school district affiliated groups, obviously don't pay for the building. Community groups, Vote Lake Bluff, what are some of the other ones? The
League of Women Voters.
voters, people like that wouldn't pay for the buildings, and other nonprofits who serve the local community. The only people that we would charge are for-profit groups that don't meet the criteria above. And what we've been doing for the past couple of years is just if it requires that we have an extra custodian there for supervision and or cleaning up, we charge the actual cost of the custodian. And so I'm recommending that we keep the fee the same at $75 an hour just for those for-profit groups, and then increase the cost of the custodian to $40 an hour, just due to salary increases over the last few years.
Does the custodial fee go to any group?
If we have to bring in an extra custodian for the group, we would probably not do it for Group A, but, you know, like
Maybe we should memorialize.
a scout, so
just
somebody who's
precisely
coming in on the
who's gonna-
weekend, even if there are staff who are coming in on the weekend, like we'll have a group come in and provide educational things, like the Northwestern group comes in and uses our building.
Yeah.
And we don't really charge them, but they pay for the custodian,
Mhm.
so.
And something like the Alliance, when the only time they would be charged is if they're doing a big thing and it requires extra time, and that's kind of negotiated when they have their big event.
It's typically on the weekends, because during
Yeah.
the evenings, we've got our night crew there, so like a Vote Lake Bluff comes in in the night, and we already have a crew there, so it's not.
And they support us
Yeah.
financially,
How many
too.
Group Ds have we had this past year?
Excuse me?
How many Group Ds?
0.
Yeah, we don't, this has kind of become a non-issue since we spent all the time kind of working through the different structures, and we don't bring in a lot of money from this. We really don't.
We have policy on this. Does that spell out requirements for insurance coverage by these groups?
Yes.
We always get a certificate of insurance.
Yeah. Any questions or comments? So this will be brought also at the end of the month, right, for our vote?
Yes.
Next one is superintendent search. Jean's going to update the public on the process that we are going through, that we will be entering into soon.
I am just going to be talking generalities at the end. The beginning are specific dates. This is kind of a high-level view of the superintendent search process.
Wait a minute. In case anybody doesn't know, our amazing superintendent, Dr. Sophie, is retiring on the end of June
30th.
2020.
Of 2020.
So we have over a year to plan for her replacement.
Year and a half, and I still have a lot of work to do, so. But this is a high-level kind of viewpoint of the timeline for a superintendent that would begin July 1st of 2020. Yeah, on the 12th which is just about a month from now, 3 different superintendent search firms will be coming in to interview with the board. They will be showing interest in being the company that oversees the search. They will have proposals for you to read. They're all generally around the same cost and all generally offer the same services. On February 26th, you'll approve the search firm that will be hired to find the next superintendent. Between March 1st and June 30th of this year, again, and it really makes no difference between new or old board. Some of these things, I think it's easier with the old board because all of you know our timelines and our schedules, and so I would prefer more moving towards the old before the new. The search firm comes in to just discuss the timeline. So it would not be a whole long meeting, but it's like, do you want to start the search in May and have a superintendent named in October? Or do you want to start the search in the fall and really name the superintendent by Christmas? The majority of districts name their superintendents in December, and you're considered out of the gate early when you do that. And the reason I say that, especially in this coming year, new boards are seated in early May, and usually by the summer, boards and superintendents know if that relationship's going to be good between all of them. And so some superintendents make the decision to look for new jobs in early fall. So I would recommend that you hold off and start the process according to the timeline here. Whereas in September, you would get the stakeholder feedback. You would not, the search firm would, through surveys, focus groups, whatever you tell them you want feedback from. A profile is developed of the superintendent that you're looking for, posted on the website, and put in applications everywhere. It's posted in many locations. They call it nationwide search. I call it the intergalactic search. And the windows usually end around the end of October. Around the end of September, beginning of October, the search firm comes in when all this is going on, discusses the profile and the logistics of when do you want to interview, how many do you want to interview, who do you want to be involved in the interviews, what's the exact process. For the 3 people that hired me on this board, if you remember, the search firm interviewed me first. Then I met with the board on a Saturday afternoon from 2 to 4. I can tell you the time. And then I had dinner with the board the following week. Then there was a site visit to the school district that I was in that actually Mark was on and met with many of my work colleagues. Many districts have panels of people that they work with in the district. I did not interview with other people in the district, but I know that there was a lot of stakeholder feedback put in the process. So it's really up to you as a board on how you want to do that. Let's see, then in November, the search firm will interview the candidates, and then at the regular November board meeting next year, the search firm's going to present you a slate of candidates. Usually they're 5 to 6. You look them all over and you might say, you know, this particular candidate, we heard things about in their district, we don't want to visit, we don't want to interview them. Or you say it's a great slate, we're ready. And you will interview all the candidates on that slate, provide feedback, narrow it down to usually 2 to 3, and then make some decisions as to, you know, how many more sets of interviews? Are you going to do a dinner? Are you going to have a site visit? How is all that going to work? In December, at some point, you make an offer to the candidate. They accept. Getting the contract in place usually takes about 1 to 2 weeks. And then the superintendent is named and the board approves his or her contract in December. I would highly recommend you get the superintendent named in December at some point. The timing on that's really important. And then in January, we talk a little bit about transitions, and that's it. Anybody have questions on the process?
Sounds easy.
The 3 of you that went through it, have any feedback? Because we talked a little bit about the site visit. You didn't find that necessarily that
I wasn't a
meaningful.
big fan of that, but it's a lot of work. So Lots of
Is
conversations.
that interviewing the search firms was not all that useful. I felt like it was sort of a parade and dog and pony show, and all of them were basically doing the same thing. So reputation for doing a good job seems to me more relevant to them whether they can come in and use complete sentences. But
Although that is a good thing if they can do that.
yeah, it is a
Complete
good thing.
sentences.
But that might even happen after I'm gone, so I don't care that much. But I felt like, wait, I couldn't tell the difference between that firm and that firm. Their proposals look the same, and what are we
hard to keep it
spending that
straight.
time for?
Yeah.
Here's the one thing I would suggest to you on that, because I think that's a really good point. Whoever you get to come in from the search firms is going to be in the community representing all of you to get feedback. So you better make sure that when you interview the search firms, those are people you want out in front saying this board hired a really good consultant to do the search, because they are all going to be representing all of you.
And I don't remember it happen, I don't remember it for your search, but I remember we hired a search firm for something else where there was at least one of the firms that came in, and I think it was really obvious that we all knew right away that that was not the right, there was like, somebody dropped off the map pretty quick, if I recall.
Oh, maybe.
So sometimes there's value like that.
Margaret, I think we.
It was.
It
Was Margaret.
Yeah.
And I think when we did this, all those years ago now, we had questions about why do we need a search firm? And I don't know, we're all professionals, we're all accustomed to hiring people. But I think once you go through that process and you see everything they put into it, it does kind of make sense. It's an expense, but it also professionalizes the search. It gives you the assurance that, all the materials are being handled in a confidential way and professionally. And I think it was good. It also keeps the board from having to do probably mountains of paperwork. So.
And Shelley and I will be working with the
We
search
don't get
firms
paid
to
enough
help
for that.
with dates and all that. So,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay. And then I think we bring back Mr. Khan for one last opportunity.
Yes, we just wanted to take you through some of the capital spending plans for the next several years. We've gotten back, as you saw, our report from the architects on the condition of our buildings, and we've had our technology partner look at our infrastructure needs. And we will have a big capital plan, but this is sort of the first 3 years of it. So we laid out the first year, what we want to finish this next summer, and then we've sort of combined the out summers, and those are I'd say the next most highest priority projects that we'd like to address, and the order will just depend on funding or budget constraints and other issues, or what we can get to first, and also planning time. So for the next summer, so in general, we want to also, I think that we need new furniture refresh in our building. When we did the middle school, we got new furniture in areas, but we didn't get any new classroom furniture. And we said, we're going to plan on phasing this in over time. And then we haven't really had new furniture at the elementary school since it was built. So we're working with our architects and with the company that provided our furniture for the middle school project to plan sort of a menu, like a classroom set, and then there'd be a kind of a core set for each classroom, and then teachers would have a menu of options to choose from to kind of fill in. So we'd have a lot of different seating. That's kind of the big, and a lot of the curricula have a mixture of seating and mixture of classroom arrangements. The estimate was about $15,000 per classroom, and we're going to target between 4 and 6 classrooms per year for furniture. And then we, next summer, want to finish the middle school, some of the things that we didn't get a chance to do during the big renovation, particularly finishing the casework in the existing classrooms. We did one classroom this summer, and it turned out great, and we're going to do the rest of them next summer. Paint the remaining lockers and renovate the bathrooms. I think this estimate's a little high because most of the bathrooms are in good shape. It's more the floors, and it's more cosmetic things in the bathrooms. And then the big thing is to replace the boilers at the middle school. And that's something that we would start in January and work towards getting them ordered and put in the summer. We're looking at doing high-efficiency boilers and seeking some energy incentive money from NICOR and North Shore Gas. And then at the elementary school, looking at doing the audiovisual equipment in the gym. Because it's such a large space, the projector and the speakers and things that go in there are very expensive. And we were looking potentially at getting some grant money from the Alliance to help defray the cost of this project.
Teachers are really having a hard time teaching in there because the audio doesn't work. And I know I presented in there for opening day this year, and I was appalled at the sound quality. So it needs to be done. That was why it ranked high on our priority.
Yeah. And then over the next 2 summers, we have 6 air handlers that provide all basically the HVAC, the heat, at the middle school. This was not touched. This was original to the 1980s edition. They've been chugging along and working. So it's just something that they pointed out that needs to be addressed. And then the west parking lot asphalt. So the big parking lot at middle school hasn't been touched for a long time, and there's a lot of cracks. And like both of these, we could probably patch or repair or just fix as things break. But these are kind of the 2 biggest ticket items that we have on the radar as things that are most urgently need to be addressed.
As part of the capital plan that White did.
Right. So at the elementary school, we've replaced all the classroom projectors at the middle school, and the classroom projectors at the elementary school are at the end of life, and so we were looking at doing that as well. That's a large expense just due to the number of classrooms. And then this, it says K2, it should say 2 to 5, the front playground, not the rear playground. At the elementary school, we did the rear playground with the wood chips and the rubber surfacing, and we need to do that in the front to meet ADA requirements. We currently don't have any children who need it in the front, and so that's why we can delay it probably for 1 more summer. And then the wireless access points, this is our infrastructure that provides all of our internet service for our wireless devices, needs to be refreshed every 5 to 7 years. And we did the elementary school first, so that's kind of first in line to be refreshed. And then district-wide, we need a new phone system and a new access control system. The phone system is internal. It's not the lines into the school, but it's the kind of lines around the school or from point to point. And then the access control system is really antiquated, and that's kind of our badges, ID badges that get into the school. And so that's a security feature that needs fixed. And so we'll be balancing sort of the urgency and the budget for those items going out for the next 2 summers.
So the 410's already budgeted, right?
In my long-term projection, I had about, the 410 is budgeted.
10's budgeted. And the 15 grand, the 90, or 60 to 90 grand that you anticipate for the classrooms, you're going to just see how the budget flows during the year and fit those in, or what's the plan?
Because we're talking summers here, things can kind of get pushed across the fiscal year in terms of budgets. So that's, and we also, as we said, that the first year of the teacher contract is going to be more expensive. So there may be less room for capital
The first year,
but then we would maybe push it back or do it in the summer, but do it after July 1st to manage the budgets.
Okay.
Any questions? So now I offer the opportunity for public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please do so. Not seeing a rush to the podium. Anybody else like to comment on the board? Any last minute reminders? Okay. At 7:53, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks all.